Hey, what is up? This is Jake Hofer with Exodus. In this video, we have an interview with Ryan Springer. Ryan was on the last week's episode of Whitetail Cribs. It's linked in the description below. If you haven't done so, be sure to check that out. In this particular video, it's an interview that we discuss the kind of magic big buck divide going through the state of Ohio, where the majority of the really big deer are killed. We talk about the moon, and we also talk about some different tactics that Ryan uses to get on big deer consistently. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos, and let's get into the interview.
Lights,
Camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
Okay, so here we are. We are in the home of Ryan Springer, another avid, crazy, obsessive Ohio whitetail bow hunter, a brand friend of Exodus. We've known Ryan for a few years now. He's actually, I don't want to say old friends with John. I don't want to give anybody's age away here, but some of you guys know, some of you listeners know John Haidt, one of the co-owners of Exodus, and this is, I guess, a long-time friend. We'll keep it that long-time friend. So Ryan,
Yep. 20 plus years, I'd say.
There you go, 20 plus years. So I guess introduce yourself to the audience, what you do for a living, and all the other things that you have going on. And I will say, the more I'm around you, number one, the more I like you, and two, the more I realize, the old phrase, if someone's like an onion, you just keep peeling the layers back.
Yeah, that's right.
You're like an big old purple onion.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, I appreciate you being here, Chad.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to go over basically, what I do is civil engineer. I work for the USDA. I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel around about half of the state of Ohio. I get to meet a lot of different hunters, in my role, watching over different construction projects that we, fund, which helps to, I guess, kind of feed my obsession, with talking with these guys. But I've been hunting deer since I could pedal a bicycle and go to a woods and hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing that for, I don't know, probably going on close to 30 years now. Yeah. So have 2 good kids, Mason and Kate, age 8, almost 9, and 10. Wonderful wife, Shauna. And, we've been living here now for about 15 years, I'd say.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. I didn't know you were a civil engineer. That makes us even more alike, I guess. I was a CCET dropout at Youngstown State, so I didn't quite finish. Bigger and better things to do at that time in my life. I don't know. I was crazy about chasing rodeo dreams, but
no, nothing wrong with that.
No, but outside of that, I guess the first time I met you, it was through John Haidt, and then we've had several conversations. As for, you also own an outfitting business. You
right.
are also I don't know what the technical position would be, but director, president of the Ohio
right.
Outfitters and Guide Association.
Yes.
Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep. Partner of mine and I, Chris Ruggles, we both basically run it, and we're just at this point, kind of it's in its infancy, grabbing some of the outfitters that we can in the state. There's not an organization that has, basically one platform to represent all of them, so we're working to do that. Also have Bow Hunting Ohio Whitetails, an outfitter service that we run together. Chris and I own it. He and I partner together on it, and we like helping guys that want to do it yourself style hunts. Generally guys that are a little more experienced, that want to come to the state and just need a good piece of private property and a place to stay, or they'll stay at their own place, right? So those are the type of guys that we generally help out. More seasoned guys that want to come in and just need a good piece of private property that's hunted very lightly, has good quality animals on it. So that's what we focus on.
Right. And I just from talking to you, it makes more sense to me than we do talk to quite a few outfitters, and the outfitters are always nuts, or guides are always nuts about figuring these deer out, because that's, I think for us, guys like us, that's the biggest part of the obsession, is trying to figure these deer out and
Right.
put yourself within 40 yards, 30 yards or whatever.
Sure.
So I guess to surround yourself or have clients that are like-minded, I guess that just kind of makes sense to me with the type of person you
Yeah,
are.
that's it. I mean, it started for me. I like to elk hunt, right? So we've gone out west for, I think, since '06, and we've been out and doing it ourselves, public land, no guides, and just cut our teeth on it, did it the hard way, learned it, and I guess I just like the, the thought of doing something on your own, right? So that's kind of my goal in helping these guys, bring them up here, steer them in the right direction, just kind of say, here's a good spot over here, here's a good spot, and we'll have conversations throughout the year. They'll ask me my opinion on, how the moon may be affecting them, what to look for, watch out for weather fronts, different things like that, how to, make the best of their time here, and I like advising them and helping them out on that end, so works out pretty well.
Well, I can tell just from, some of the pre-roll conversations before we were actually mic'd up, we should have been recording the whole time probably, because we had a pretty good discussion on the moon. We talked about the rut. We talked about, I guess, moon phase and transit times. We talked about that line across the state of Ohio, whatever you want to call it. You probably have a term for that, or you probably have it coined to something, but there's something there. The thought, or I guess the feeling of being in open, vast country, that style hunting, the ground and pound, like trying to, get down and get after. So that's what I said about being an onion. There's a lot of stuff here that, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to cover everything at a super, super deep level, but
it could take days.
Yeah, it probably can, and it's already getting late this evening. But there are several things that I could tell that you're passionate about. You've mentioned your day job and how much you get to drive. And when we were talking about the moon, Jeff Murphy came up and kind of his charts, and we were talking about observations. Could you talk a little bit about that? And,
Sure.
And kind of how you were correlating deer movement to what.
Yep. Yeah, a good friend of mine and I, years ago, we started tackling this. Why are the deer moving when they're moving, right? So some evenings we would go out and drive around and see 100 deer, right, spread out a bunch, through different fields, over a 10-mile area. Other nights you go out and you couldn't find 3 deer. And it wasn't a weather front, right? It was a normal evening weather-wise. But so we started saying, why is that, right? And it kind of took me to, do a little homework, and I landed at the moon, right? And my day-to-day job, I was, I'm fortunate enough I get to drive around a good bit and talk to a lot of guys. But as I'm driving around, I'm seeing deer some days, at certain times, and other days not. And I started trying to put it all together. So I did kind of focus in on some early, moon stuff. And some of the first stuff I found was Moonstruck and some of the charts by Jeff Murray.
Yep.
And so I started looking at those, and I thought, well, it's kind of a funny little spinny chart, but we'll check it out, And next thing you know, these things, they're pretty accurate, So fast forward about 12 or 15 years, at this point, I don't need a chart, it's in my head, but I've paid attention, and I've learned, some of the stuff that they brought forward. And it's, it's very helpful, because it helps me basically say, what is the moon phase? Where should these deer be? Where should I be hunting? Right? Am I hunting close to a bedding, zone? Am I hunting, basically on a field edge, right? So I try to set tree stands, based on certain moon phases when I'll be hunting there. I also, obviously the wind, you've got that to fool with. But the moon is big for me. I mean, I even plan elk hunts around the moon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, as we were talking about the moon and phases, and we were talking about transit times, overhead, underfoot, those major feeding periods. You had mentioned something about a full moon late October. You felt like would adjust that rut, or I guess the bell curve of the rut. Maybe move it forward a couple of days, move it back a couple of days, and that you would actually, like you said, plan elk hunts, around the full moon or the moon phase.
Sure. Yeah, and this is my opinion, right? And this is just what I've learned.
Well, you have a heck of
a lot of people.
You have a heck of a wall that says that there's,
right.
There's some knowledge there. So.
Right. Yeah, and it does. With the whitetail, the biggest thing that I've learned is, let's say a doe wants to come in roughly, between November 11th and the 14th, right? My opinion is the moon will push that a little bit early or a little bit later, right? So if depending on when that full moon is, right? So I think this year we had October 30th full moon. So about, using that October 30th date, you're going to get a peak, roughly 7 days after that, right? And maybe it's not a breeding peak, but it's maybe an action peak, right? So that's what I'm looking for. When's the activity, going to be heavy? So, if the full moon lands more around, say, November 7th, maybe 3 days after that, by the 10th, you're going to start getting that, that peak, which, that peak, I don't necessarily want to be hunting that time, right? That is what I consider lockdown. Things are slow.
Right,
you can get a day and a half or two where it's just, you don't see a deer and you're going, what's going on? So, if you want to see a lot of deer or more deer, but sometimes smaller deer, that pre-rut phase, is a good time leading right up to that peak. After that, generally you don't see quite as many deer, right? But you tend to see a little more quality, right? On the, prior to the peak, a lot of those big ones I think will pick up their does at night, right? They're pretty nocturnal still. There's plenty of them out there, right? But afterwards, I picture it this way. An older buck, he's ranging, farther. He's looking harder. He's going, farm to farm to farm, trying to find that last doe. So generally, a lot of the bigger deer are taken by us locals here, right? And that would be, I would say from about the 15th on in November, clear to the end of the month. So that's always a good, time, to try to pick up one that you've never seen before.
What about non-rutting activity? That moon phase. I know we talked a little bit about the full moon, that midday movement, bright moon, whatever you want to call it. Is that something that's still on your radar outside of the rut? So if you're going into this late season, December, I know some people say that there's a second rut for those does, not being bred, coming back in 28 days later. But December, even I guess early season. So do you think? Are you still paying attention to moon phase in that early and late season? Outside of the rut.
Right. Yeah, I do, but I also look at generally what are the deer doing, right? So that time of the year, early season and late season, they're on a bed feed pattern, right? So bedding, feeding, that's what they're after. So I take that into account, and say, okay, generally on a quarter moon phase, right? That is the key to be at a field edge, right? Right at that dark, gray light morning or evening, right? That's a perfect time. So if I'm hunting a quarter moon phase, and it's based on a field edge, that's where I want to be. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. If it's late season, let's say, and you have a full moon, I know that midday is going to be a prime time.
Agreed.
Your morning and evenings generally not that good.
Why a field edge with a quarter moon? Why a field edge with a quarter moon phase? What's the correlation there?
It's hard to put into words, but just watch and you'll see it.
Okay.
Just watch.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times when you drive around, in fact, I would schedule. I remember one group came up out of the Carolinas, and we looked, and I said, okay, late August, is generally a good time to see some bighorns, and they wanted to see what's around. So I said, let's look around late August, right? And the evenings are cooler then. So we picked a quarter moon phase. I said, here's the date, whatever it was. Let's come into town this weekend. We'll go take a drive. It was unbelievable, right? All the big deer that you see. They came back up. They were so excited. They came back up a week later. Didn't see hardly anything. Looking in the exact same fields. And
Yeah.
it was the quarter moon phase. The quarter moon phase puts them in the fields, right before it's daylight. Right at evening time,
Right.
Right before it's dark, and in the mornings. That's just where they're at.
Do you think that's we talked a little bit about the illumination of the moon, how much light's available. Do you think it has to do with the social activity and I guess, security at night? You think there's any relation there, like being out in those open areas?
Yeah. I mean, I think it does. I think what you're alluding to, as we talked about earlier, a lot of times when you have a full moon at night, the deer or the elk, right, in my experience, they'll be very active all night.
Right.
And they generally lay up in the mornings, before daylight.
Yep.
So you'll get in there in the morning, and it's a very slow morning. A lot of guys will pick up, and, lunchtime they'll be heading out. That's really the time to be hunting, right?
Yes.
That 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, that range is key. So, yeah, to me, the moon tells me when to be in the woods. Now, I can't sleep in, and go out into the woods at 10 o'clock. I've got to get out. Even though it may be slow, I've got to get out, right?
Yeah.
So, but just knowing that, it makes me, commit to staying in that stand all day,
right.
or at least do the midday.
And just for reference, I guess the Moonstruck book that was written by, as you said, Jeff Murray. I think that was published probably in the 80s.
80s or 90s, yeah.
I have a copy. Sure. I have a copy of that at home. I bought 5 or 6 years ago. Bought it off eBay or whatever. I do have a copy of that, but I believe, a lot of guys today are familiar with. I'm not gonna be able to think of it. The Adam Hayes, the Moon Guide,
right?
The Moon Guide, but essentially, from what I understand, don't quote me on this, but that Moon Guide is Jeff Murphy's. Is that?
Oh, see, I'm not familiar. I didn't know that Adam had a current moon guide.
Yeah, it's a dial.
Yeah.
It's a dial or a wheel.
Okay.
And
so he purchased that off of Murray, probably.
Well, it's a little bit different.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So there's things with, I guess, the red moon overhead certain times, and then wherever that underfoot or overhead moon lands, he's telling you to hunt feeding areas, bedding areas, travel areas.
Right.
So there's a 3-day window there.
That's right.
But I don't quote me, but I believe that was Jeff was the originator of that. I think.
I believe so. And one thing on Adam, I was able to talk to Adam probably 10 years ago. I would say I met him at a show, and when I meet guys like that are very successful, I always ask them, when do you shoot your deer? Right? To me, that's key. Knowing the time frame, and for him at the time, he said that he focuses on that October 15th to 19th window, and but for him, you got to remember, he hunts a particular deer, right? Picks it out, hunts it all summer, and he wants that one. And I recall that he said, in November it gets a lot harder because you're unpredictable, but during that 15th to the 19th period, they'll reappear at a food source, right, that they've been visiting all summer. Of course, when they go hard horn, say September 1st, they tend to turn nocturnal and not be there, but they'll reappear at that 15th to the 19th mark, and they're anxious, and that's the key word, right, they're trying to pick up that very first doe that's coming in. So once I heard that, it kind of struck me. I thought, well, October's kind of slow for us, generally. But once I started paying attention to that little time frame right there, he was absolutely right. And I have photos after photos over the years, of bucks reappearing at a food source during that period of time. So good information right there.
That is a super, super interesting thought. That's something that, of all the guys we've interviewed, we haven't heard anything that specific. And I do believe that there is a lot of truth. And we talked about annual trail camera data a little bit before we started recording. And I don't think that we're going to go into that, but knowing that they're in bachelor, that does make sense because they're in bachelor groups all summer. Testosterone levels are low, photoperiod's starting to get smaller, shrink, I guess. Testosterone rises, they break up from those bachelor groups. They're all finding the kind of their own home range for a couple weeks, and then coming back to that summer food source because there's does. If you understand the hierarchy of the whitetail bedding structure, does are always bedded close to food. So if they're on those summer food sources, then they're coming back to
That's right.
So that makes a lot of sense. I guess I never put 2 and 2 together, but I guess you did for us.
Well, Adam did for us. Yeah.
So is that something you do often? Is ask when?
I do. Yeah, I do. There was there was one other gentleman I can think of that, you know, he would consistently harvest 180-inch deer year after year, you know. So guys like that get my attention. When I see that, you know, I start asking questions. And his key time was generally from about November 15th to the 18th on, right to the end of the month. So there again, I say, well, how do you get them? So his method was, you know, he would find a big, nasty thicket, right, and find the pinch point leading into it. And he really wouldn't hunt much up and through early November, right? But he would wait till about mid-November, and he would start hunting, you know, a thicket with a big pinch point, just waiting for those, you know, those last bucks, those cruisers, you know, that are reaching out longer and farther, like we talked about, and, you know, that would be his opportunity. So, you know, that kind of made me focus, okay, when I get to that time of year, right, what's the key thing here? It's really, you know, it's really finding the bedding zones, right? Because that's where the does are. That's why he's in there looking, right? But and then it's trying to narrow it down, trying to find the easiest way in and out of that, you know, thicket. And if it's, you know, in woodlot country, it's pretty easy to figure out where that is. If it's big woods country, it's a little more difficult.
Agreed. Yeah. I think in the big woods, you really got to look at edge, topographical features. I mean, There's a lot of stuff there.
Terrain,
definitely easier in ag ground for sure. You know, as we were going through the trophy room, most of your deer were killed outside of the rut. Like you had some late October kills. Was there anything in that first 10 days of November? I mean, the deer that you killed this year is right on the coffee table in front of us. It's a mid-160s deer that was killed late.
Yeah, it was about 13th, I think, in November.
Oh, was it the 13th?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it was later than that.
It was about the 13th this year. Let's see, thinking back over them, you know, I've shot them all through November. Veterans Day is one of my favorite.
That's my birthday. It's my favorite day too.
So several of these deer have been Veterans Day deer.
That's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it works out well. I have that day off, right? So I'm in the woods daylight to dark. Yeah, and I've been successful several years in a row on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know,
it's Cameron's birthday too. I forgot.
Is it?
We share the same birthday. That's weird.
Great.
We work together and share the same birthday, and that's where you call all your big deer.
Yeah,
So,
that's perfect.
it's the best day of the year.
Yeah, it is.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So
but you just gotta hunt. That's the key. You know, the deer are in the woods 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, we try to narrow it down to this time frame and that time frame. Spend as many days out there as you can, you know, and then the question is, where do I hunt? That really is what it comes down to, but you got to hunt as much as you can.
And for the most part, you're basing a lot of that where to hunt. Like you already have your time frame. Like that's what we just talked about.
Right.
So you've kind of pulled some things out of other guys' playbooks and have seen or had experiences that, you know, tell you yourself that, hey, that makes sense. It's playing out in front of my own eyes.
Yep.
What is telling you where to hunt?
What is telling me where to
So are
hunt?
you using cameras? Are you setting like observation stands and seeing these deer with your own eyes? Is it
I read the land
on the boot scouting?
I read the land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it would come down to. You know, I put some cameras out to take inventory, you know, just kind of see what's around.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I can't say that I generally use cameras to hunt through, you know, to tell me where to hunt even. In fact, I put cameras in places I don't hunt. And what works for me is, I don't know, I can walk into an area, I can spend a little time walking around, and I can kind of put it together, and I can see it through a deer's eyes, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way I look at it. What's the easiest route to get from point A to point B, right? Where are these deer generally going to be staying? Where's the little sanctuary? You know, if I can find a neighbor that has a dog kennel out back with a dog tied to the chain, those bucks always bed right behind the dog kennel.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and why is that? And I'll tell you why, because that's its early warning, right? When that deer, that buck knows that deer can't, or that dog can't move from a chain, right? He's in a kennel or what. But as soon as that dog, you know, hears something, he's barking, and that buck's alert. So I can think of several properties.
Pretty good damn tip right there.
Yeah, I can think of several properties. One this direction and the other down there, where specifically I know that, you know, good bucks were bedding right up against dog kennels on neighbors' properties. In fact, where I hunt just down the road, there was a neighbor had a dog at one point. Unfortunately, the dog's no longer there. But I could sit in the stand, and about a certain time, I would hear the dog bark, and I would stand up and grab my bow. I knew that here they're coming through. But as far as a good bedding spot, look for those little places. Those are key.
Yeah, that's a. I don't know. That just kind of blew my mind a little bit. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's just an additional, I guess, layer of security for them.
Right. They learn.
Yeah. And a lot, I guess, in this area, I guess we should describe that, because a lot of times when we're on this podcast and a lot of times we're talking about big woods, hundreds or thousands, tens of thousands of acres, continuous timber. It's a little bit different here. This is, it is hill country, but
it's a hill country, but it's a mix of ag. So, right. You can say it's essentially where the glacier stopped in Ohio, right? So, we have, you go north of here and it's relatively flat farm fields, with some woods. If you go to the south, essentially to the Ohio River, it's nearly solid woods.
Right.
So when you find that nice line, right, which in Ohio you can see the line, just zoom in on Google Earth and zoom out, you can see where the ag meets the big woods. That's a good spot, and I've learned that from driving around talking to different guys all over the state. The deer, they have the food that they need to keep their body weights up, and then they also have the cover they need to get the age on them. Mm-hmm. That's key.
Yeah, there's we talked to a lot of different guys, and my personal belief is age is more important than nutrition, because if a deer doesn't, if it doesn't hit 5.5, 6.5 years old, it's never going to be at its full capable potential. I mean, the skeletal system has to mature before it puts on the majority of the nutrients, minerals, vitamins, whatever, the nutrients from their food to their antlers.
Sure.
Do you agree with that, or are you more, because there's also guys that say, nutrition's more important, because you can grow a 3.5-year-old deer that's 160 inches.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, I know it's a little bit of both.
It is a little bit of both.
What holds the priority for you?
Yeah, you have to have the age, right? But not always. So there's always an exception here, right? It's the key, I would say, generally speaking, right? Because that's what a lot of this is, or specific. But generally speaking, if I have an area that has a good food source for my deer, right, I would focus on that spot more than an area that would have a lower quality food source, right, but a higher age structure. Mm-hmm. If I'm looking for a bigger deer, I'm going to be hunting that, that food source. So I really focus on that line. Where can they get to that corn, soybeans, alfalfa, right? And then where can they get back to the big woods, to survive? Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I guess that you kind of foreshadowed a little bit that, you're going in and hanging pre-hung stands, I guess, based on the moon. You had mentioned that. Are you doing that like throughout the entire season? Like you have pre-hung stands on your properties and that's all you're hunting? Or are you like a mobile guy, you hunt off the ground a little bit? Like what's your approach with that?
Right. I used to do a lot of climbing, right? Had a climber stand, and I did that a lot. And I still do, on new properties. If I need to scout them out, I'll take that in and pop up in a couple little spots and try things out. But generally speaking, once I get to know a place, I like to have a stand hung, right? And that way you can go in, you can be quiet, right? But I will say that since I do quite a bit of elk hunting out west, that's taught me to, be mobile. And the hardest thing for me is to go hunt out there for several weeks in September, walking umpteen miles, right, and then come back to Ohio and be stuck on a little postage stamp, right, sitting in the tree stand. I just want to get up and run, right? So at some points, I do become a little mobile in Ohio, and I think it helps, especially, if you're wondering what's going on the other side of the property. I'm not one to wander around much on the properties, right? I kind of stay out of it. But, from time to time, I've learned that it is good to, just go sneak around a little bit and see what's happening. Maybe they've moved. That this year, that was one thing that happened on this property. Generally, the deer would go out on the north end of the property, to a field. But this year, they tend to go to the south. And I didn't realize that until, well into November, I started setting cameras over there, and actually I got a picture of this guy, but I didn't know it until after I already shot him because I didn't check it. But, they had changed their pattern, and I had all kinds of bucks on that south end where generally they're coming out on the north. There was some logging activity across the road. I think that may have pushed them, but I didn't really think of that ahead of time. But
do you think, I guess in your opinion, what's the biggest negative influence on deer movement?
as far as?
Well, the thing that you just said about, human intrusion, logging activity, pushing those deer south, do you think is human intrusion, and I guess it's different because, like you said, a lot of guys want shoebox answers or like these, one size fits all, like you do A, B, and C, and you're going to go kill a deer.
Right.
And it's, it just doesn't work like that. Everything's.
No. You got to have the property. I mean, that's the big deer have to be there.
Right.
Some of the spots I'm fortunate enough to have, the neighbors do a good job, right? They're not shooting every 130 and 140 inch deer, and that makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you pass them up, they'll on average put on 20 inches next year, and so that adds up a lot. I would say the deer have to be there, right? That's the number one.
So let's go back a couple words, I guess, and I'm going to reframe that question a little bit. Is, in your opinion, you see this a lot, so you have properties, all over the state, hunting big deer, bringing clients in. What do you see with hunting pressure? When people have bad access, bad scent control, wind, whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, do you see hunting pressure shutting deer movement down, or
Absolutely.
do you think that's just made up?
No, it's huge. Yeah, it's the key to everything, right? A deer learns quickly whether you're there, whether you're affecting their environment, and they'll move on, right? They've got thousands of acres to move around out here. The key is, when you have a spot and you're hunting, and I'm fortunate on one particular little piece, in fact, both of them that I hunt, they're not big acreage, right? But I'm the only one there. And that's everything because nobody else hunts in there but me, right? So I can monitor, my time in, my time out, my path in, my path out, the amount of scent that I leave, right? I kind of focus everything on that, where the deer are going to be coming from. And sometimes I just let them have, the particular areas, and then I hunt the edges. They'll move around in there enough, I'll catch them. It kind of varies, when you hunt a bigger tract of land. But on small spots, when you have a little piece, there's really only a couple good spots in there to hunt, right? So the little ones are a little bit easier, right? But they're also easier to kind of bugger up. Yeah, because you're hunting, that may be his core little spot right there. So, you've really got to watch what you're doing. And when it comes to scent, I'm a little different than most, I would say, for probably, I would say 10 years now. And this is kind of funny. It started, I was buying some, different products out there, trying to get my scent control, under wraps. And I had just made a big investment on some stuff, and it didn't work, right? I was getting busted, and I was doing everything I could. And at that point, I said, what do I have to lose? I'm going to try it, right? So since then, I have been using smoke, right? And for me, the way I do it is I still, make my clothes scent free, right? Wash them and my body, right? But then before I go hunting, I take a propane torch and light it, and I have already piled up some leaves in the yard. They happen to be sycamore because there's some sycamores down there. They smoke really good. Leave them in a pile, let them get good and wet from rain. Reach into the bottom of the pile, put a heaping handful on it, and just let it go. I've made like a little chimney out of some rocks, but you put that on there, and it just bellows out some real white, thick smoke, and I get down in it, and I make sure I get it in my hair, on my skin, all over, right? I get covered in it pretty well. I'll cover my clothes in it, my bow, my backpack, whatever it may be, everything but my boots, right? I keep the boots, sprayed, scent-free in a bag, and then I'll head to the tree. I am always cautious about which way the wind's blowing, but I generally don't care. If I want to hunt a certain tree stand because of the moon or what, I may have my reasons. Even if the wind's not ideal, I'll hunt it, right? And
now, when you say ideal, is that ideal for you or ideal for the deer? Because there's, we talked to a lot of people, and there's big differences.
Sure. I'm not afraid of that deer being downwind of me.
Gotcha.
Right, with this system. That's the
Gotcha.
bottom line. And like I say, for 10 years now, I've had excellent results with it. And I'll use it, forever at this point. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a game changer. It really is when you don't have to pay attention to that wind.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of guys will hunt the wind, and this took me, I guess, progressing as a whitetail hunter. This is one of the things that took me the longest to learn, because when I grew up, I guess, in the era, I'm just not that much, 10 years younger than you, or not even 10, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 years younger than you, but I grew up like watching these TV shows. The internet was just kind of starting to be a thing in the late 90s.
Sure.
Was off to college, busy doing whatever, but it was like you watch these TV shows and everyone's like, oh, I got the wind's blowing right in my face. Got the wind dead in my face.
Right.
And it took me and that's how when I was thinking of hunting the wind, that's what I would think. Like, I need the wind blowing right at my face.
Sure.
So I'm not. But then as you start to learn deer and you talk to guys, Dan Infalt, Andre DeQuisto, guys that are killing all these big deer, that they're giving the deer the wind, because the whitetails, its strongest defense is their nose, is what they believe, and those deer are either going to walk with a wind quartering to them, or some type of wind with, I guess, they're not going to walk with a tailwind, basically, is what
right.
is what they're saying.
Kill them on the curves.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So it's that took me a long time to figure out that, the wrong wind for me is the right wind for the deer to be there. And that's the biggest thing, get the deer there.
That's key. Yeah, that is key. And that's a good point. When I can hunt the wind, obviously I do, right? But there again, using this smoke, they will smell you when they go downwind of you. And I've watched it 100 times. That I know that my wind is blowing right there, and I can see the deer, whatever it may be, walking towards it. And as soon as it hits that wind line, it'll stop, lift its nose up, turn its head, flick its tail, just walk on. Not raise its tail and blow out, right? And rarely, I mean, I think 2 or 3 times in 10 years have I ever had a deer blow at it, right? But they'll acknowledge that they smell something, right? But it's not the human scent. It's not the threatening scent. And here, there's a lot of people that burn, in their house. They heat their house with wood or whatever. So smoke is a naturally occurring smell, right? And maybe that's why, they don't alarm. I don't know. But at the end of the day, they recognize the smell. They stop and they'll actually smell it, but they won't alarm. They'll just keep moving on.
Right. They're not associating that smell with danger, I guess.
Right. Yep.
No negative experience. That's another interesting thought. And I've, for a short time I was on the Ohio Outdoors, that forum, Ohio Outdoors, I think that's what it's called. And there would be guys talking about smoking their clothes, and there's a whole super long thread on that forum about guys using the bee smokers. That's why I asked that question about using the bee smoker. But
sure.
You're actually...
I've never tried it. I've had a couple people try it with, not positive results. And so I ask, I step back and say, why is that? And, I don't really know, but I know that my method, I literally get the smoke right on my skin, head to toe, right? I try to cover myself as much as I can. And I think that may be part of it. When I used to hunt a lot, right? My greatest November, I hunted 140 hours, and that was working a full-time job, not taking a single day off. I mean, I lived in a tree stand, but I would smoke, I had Fridays off, so I'd hunt Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, daylight to dark, but I would smoke up each day, and my skin would smell like beef jerky until Wednesday of the of the midweek. It just gets in you, right? And I think that's key when you're hitting the those little bee smokers. You're getting it on your clothes, but you're not getting it on your skin. Yeah. Right. And maybe that's why. I don't know. But
no, I would agree with you. I mean, we're shedding skin particles and hair follicles and dead skin cells and all that stuff. I mean, you brush up against a bush or something, and you're dropping how many scent molecules all over the place.
Sure.
And so that's all of that's a big deal. Well, we're going on about 40 minutes. Is there anything else specific that you'd like to touch on before we start to get this thing wrapped up a little bit? I know, like I said, we've been here for a few hours now, and it's like the more that we talk, the more that we're finding out. I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting point. So
we can do this for a while. We should do it again.
Yeah, we will have to do it again.
Yeah.
We're down this way quite a bit. going to John's and whatnot. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I would just like to, kind of wrap up with saying one thing I've learned is, how to hunt whitetail. But having some out west experience and hunting elk since, for the last 13 years, that's really helped, right? Give me a little different perspective when I come back to Ohio. There's a way that we Ohioans, hunt whitetails, but when you go out west and learn some different things, I guess you just adapt a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, think outside the box. Don't be afraid to move around a little bit. Meet them at eye level sometimes, and that's not always the easiest thing for a whitetail, but, put some boots on the ground and get out there. And if something's not working for you, don't be afraid to get down, revisit your site, take a look at your area and try to learn where they're at now. Maybe they were here last year and not here this year,
Yeah.
Where prior to going out, I would probably hunt that same, 2 or 3 stands year after year, even if it's not working. But now I know that, if something's quickly not working, or if it's not working, I quickly, try to change up,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Find the most recent information, boots on the ground scouting, and just work till you put yourself in the opportunity.
That's right. Read the land. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, we can't thank you enough. We're definitely gonna take you up on inviting us back. I guess you'll
Absolutely.
be a second offender on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But for anyone listening, I'm not sure when this will actually air. If you're listening to this and have not seen the Cribs episode, go to the Exodus Trail Camera YouTube channel and check out Ryan's crib. Couple pretty cool things. Couple giant elk, bunch of big whitetails, pile of sheds. Got some cool stuff, cool stories to share. So again, guys, we can't thank everyone enough for tuning in. Ryan, is there a plug for the websites? Any websites you'd like to mention to find you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Any Ohio outfitters, feel free to take a look at the Ohio Outfitters and Guides website. Give us a call. Partner Chris Ruggles and I, we're always available. Reach out to us. Same thing if anybody's looking for, kind of a do-it-yourself, self-guided archery hunt in Ohio, give us a call. Bow Hunt in Ohio Whitetails, the outfitter's name, and we're happy to help you out.
Absolutely. And that is a wrap.